So I recently did a video on some of the best ITX cases that I've personally reviewed, and one of the big things that I was getting across in that video was that hardware optimization is really important. In other words, how good are the CPU cooler clearances, what size graphics card can you fit in this case, and how good is the cooling. So this is the Cooler Master H100P, and if I'm honest with you guys, this case would not get on that list. It wouldn't even get close. Today's video is sort of why it wouldn't get on that list, and why I think personally this is a pretty poorly designed ITX case. So you can kind of think of the H100P as a squashed down H500P. They both share the same design language and the same look, which I personally actually really like. It is a plastic construction on the outside, but the space gray finish does sort of mimic what you would get from aluminium to some degree. So I'm personally okay with this. It is cost effective and it does look pretty good. It's when you start looking inside the H100P that you do start to get a bit disappointed in what you can actually fit in this case, or what you can't actually fit in this case would probably be better phrased. So let's start off with a size comparison first against some other mainstream ITX cases. So here we have the H100P next to the Fractal Design Node 202, the Cougar QBX, and the NZXT H10i. The H100P has an overall cube-like proportion and does come in at around 18.5 liters according to my measurements. Those aren't official volume measurements from Cooler Master. This means that it is on the upper end of what we would call a small form factor case, and hence we would assume some pretty decent hardware clearances and cooling potential. Now, one thing that you'll notice straight away is the massive 200mm fan at the front intake, and it's great to see that Cooler Master have stuck with the mesh approach for the front panel. They've also provided enough clearance between the fan and the front panel so that it doesn't end up choked. However, the fan is only DC and it is locked to just 800 RPM. The fan is RGB though, and you do get an included controller in the box. Now, one massive consequence of having a cube-like proportion like this is that the GPU length is really not that great at all. Here we're limited to a GPU length of just 220mm. Now, ITX graphics cards are actually okay. This one's the ITX Aero from MSI. It's an RTX 2070, and it actually does run pretty cool. On an open test bench, you see it at around 72 degrees C, and I've tested it in other cases where it sits at about 75. We'll get to the thermal results in just a second. Just know that the bottom of the case is completely blocked. The side of the case is completely blocked with this side panel, and I will note that there is a ton of wasted space in front of the graphics card that you really can't use for anything. Now let's get to my biggest gripe with the H100P, and it's not that it's blocked off or anything like that. It is the power supply mounting. So as you can see, the power supply protrudes from the back of the case like that, and I have no idea why they did this. So here they've basically forced upon the user to go with an ATX power supply. I've used an SFX power supply via a bracket here for testing, but yeah, basically this big protrusion here at the back of the case is so the case can accommodate an ATX power supply. So I was so confused at first why they had done this. Why have they put an ATX power supply in under a 19-liter case? And then it sort of hit me, and I might be wrong here, but I think the reason that they did this was because Cooler Master themselves don't make SFX power supplies. They only make ATX power supplies. So they don't really want to design a case for a power supply that they don't make, if that makes sense. So here they kind of want to advertise their own and sell their own ATX power supply units in this case, which is a really bad decision. The choice to go with an ATX power supply in this case is ultimately why it does not get my recommendation. One reason for that is that the CPU cooling options are incredibly limited with this power supply mounted right in front of the motherboard. Here we can go with up to an 85mm CPU cooler with an ATX power supply in there, and that gets pushed up to around 105 or 107 mils perhaps if you are using an SFX power supply. So I did try and fit in the Noctua D9L, which is a 110mm CPU cooler, and it's actually quite powerful. I've tested it in the NKSM1 and other cases, does quite well. Unfortunately, it's about 2 mils too tall to actually fit in this case. The SFX power supply could not be fitted and secured properly. So your only option then is to go with a low profile cooler. The largest one that I have on hand that can fit in here is the Noctua L12S. So for how big this case is, this honestly isn't that impressive. There are many cases around this size and even smaller that can accommodate larger tower coolers and even 240mm liquid coolers. For 2.5-inch drive mounting, you've got choices at the bottom of the case, which, like I said before, I would have preferred this was used for ventilation for the GPU GPU, you'll see why in a second, and you can also mount additional drives on the side bracket if you wish. Alright, so diving into CPU thermals now, and they're not that great at all. So with the NHL12S cooler mounted to our delidded 8700K, we should be seeing thermals around 70 to 72 degrees C, but instead we're seeing it at 82.8 due to the H100P's very poor airflow. This case should be fine for systems using an i5 or a Ryzen 5 CPU, but beyond that, it is absolutely not recommended. Even then, for gaming builds, the H100P really does not consider proper cooling for the GPU. Remember, higher GPU thermals directly result in a lower boost clock and higher fan speed, so we are voluntarily running the GPU slower and louder in this case. So two main reasons why the thermals are really bad in this case. One is that it's incredibly blocked off. This is what the side panel looks like. Side panel is also completely blocked off on this side. The bottom is blocked off. Top is mostly blocked off as well. And then for the front panel, you've just got a 200mm fan that's spinning at around 800 RPM. So really, the components are heating up. There's no active exhaust fans in the case to pull that air out. And so that hot air just keeps recirculating inside the case. So if you're looking for an affordable ITX case, this unfortunately is not it. There are other better, superior options out there like the Node 202 or the Cougar QBX, both which offer better GPU thermals and better airflow as well. Overall, the H100P does seem a bit like an afterthought, like there's not much creativity and work done to make this a really great ITX case. And this could have been a really great ITX case, don't get me wrong, for the cube proportions and whatnot, this could be really good. For example, if they had just stuck with an SFX power supply, they just had stuck with that and put it towards the front of the case beside the motherboard, you've then freed up all of the CPU cooling clearance. You gain about, I don't know, 100 mils of clearance. That's enough to mount an AIO or a larger tower cooler. And then again, if that mounting at the back there isn't used for a power supply, you can then put a 120mm exhaust fan there instead. So, I mean, I could keep going. There are a number of reasons that this case is poorly designed and could have been done a lot better. A lot of it comes down to that power supply, and I really do not know why they decided to go with ATX personally. Alright, so let me know your thoughts down below on the master case H100P. If you're interested, I will leave links in the description. As always, a huge thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.